whereby you can edit, like you are editing book, the future of a group of cells or organs or a child or a plant. And this is amazing because you can really decide. Meanwhile, it's very helpful because you can early on decide not to have a child with any malfunction in its cognitive ability by knowing where is the genes which will cause this and eliminate it through gene editing. But meanwhile, this gives power to the people who are doing this to do something else. Then this takes us to ethics. Then science without ethics will be like that we are creating a Frankenstein style in the future. Then science needs to go hand in hand with ethical code of conduct. And therefore, we can have a safe utilization of this new knowledge. But if I just go through other aspects which relate to ethics, it's a prejudice, racism, as well as discrimination, which is happening around the world. It's again, it's embedded in me and them, not we. And this is a great crisis. I mean, can you imagine that I have attended, I mean, I don't want to mention numbers, but I've attended several of the international meetings for climate change. One of them was in Copenhagen, and the people in Copenhagen was wonderful. They put signs everywhere in the city saying, Copenhagen. This is the hope of the world, that in Copenhagen, we will have an adaptation fund, and we will have a fund which will help the developing countries to grow under this change of climate change. Therefore, they can adapt to this. Copenhagen didn't work, and we came out of Copenhagen with no hope because there was no political will. The next meeting, we were in Cancun, in Mexico, wonderful Mexico. And then the motto there was, in Cancun, yes, we can. And in Cancun, we didn't do anything. We came out. This is nations of the whole world. We came out with niente, with zero, zillish, because of lack of political will. Thanks God, the last meeting in Paris, with the leadership of President Hollande, when he said, we are not going to do anything on this direction unless we don't say that we are, as members of the nations of this world, we are not going to compete with each other, but we are going to cooperate with each other. What a difference between the two trends. I hope that the signal he said will be taken, because this is a challenge. He has to change, or we have to change a lot of things to move forward. Therefore, if we talk about knowledge-based economies, if we talk about change through knowledge-based economy, then knowledge without wisdom will never work. Knowledge without morality will never work. Knowledge without spiritual aspects and respect to each other is not going to work. Therefore, it's only how we can see that we are all one. I cannot repeat what Professor Rafa has said, because what is said is right, in my opinion, is the right path forward. And I think what we heard this morning from the leader of the Women Economical Forum is very true, and I hope that every one of us can participate in this process. I do thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. Now I would like the audience, if they have any questions regarding this topic, then they can ask one by one. Yes, ma'am. Please.
Hi, thank you for the nice conversation you had just now. I wanted to ask you, don't you think...
Can we know you are from where?
Of course. My name is Gabriela. I'm from Bulgaria. I'm one of the founders of Impact Hub Sofia. So I wanted to ask you, we know that with the development of technology and science, don't you think that also there will be new questions regarding morality and spirituality? Because as we discover new and new things, maybe we can become spiritual and more spiritual enough to overcome these challenges now, but there are more and more challenges coming with every discovery that we have. Don't you think that this, let's say, fight between good and evil, let's say it like this, just to generalize it, don't you think it's a process that it's all the time? We cannot just receive this clarity and this enlightenment and just stay like this. We have to evolve every time when there is a new discovery, for example. This is just I wanted to see what you think about this.
You ask him or
It doesn't matter, both of you.
Both, yes, all right. Yeah. No, I mean, first of all, I hate to see or hate to think of evil and good are fighting each other. I imagine that it's what we call evil is just lost, is ignorance, is the people who don't understand. And that's why, maybe what I said was very academic or choose some kind of terms and so on, but it's what's behind is that the core of change that should be core of how we think of ourselves in relation to nature, in relation to ourselves, in relation to each other. So this is a very core thing. And where what we call morality is also very deceiving word, because we have that kind of set of mind, sometimes we dogmatize morality. And we need to be just flexible enough to interact with, from the deep of our heart. Making our experience is the dominant thing that is, and it's coming from love. So instead of thinking about good and evil and bad and not bad or something, we have to think of how to really connect, and connect deeply first within ourselves. So then we will discover that it's when we realize who we are, then we realize that we are not individual, one human being. We are we. That's which my husband was saying, that we realize that on the human foundation. By the way, I am a founder of a foundation which is called the Human Foundation. So deep in our heart, we are on that level of foundation. On the human foundation, we are actually connected. We are one humanity. So when we move from that kind of, of that consciousness, then we are doing good for ourselves, for the world. That's very inspiring in science, in our relationship in family, in any social work, in liberation movement, in anything, in any way, because we know that we are not fighting against the other. We are fighting for, and I am using fighting just metaphorically, we are fighting for the others, because we are part of them, and we don't see them as separate from us. So, in science, what was my husband was talking about, genetic engineering, that's very scary. That's a very scary field, because it can be, as it can be very useful. It can be very harmful. So when we are spiritual illiterate, then that kind of advancements in science, maybe it's going to be very harmful. So we have to be spiritually literate. We have to really think about our own spirit. Not that doesn't mean that we have to stop all the advancement in science, or to say to the scientists, they don't work in this direction or that direction. But parallel to that kind of advancement, we have to change our mindset, which I really started saying, because we are living in the culture of modernity. Modernity became a culture, never mind, and it creates some kind of conflict between tradition and what's going on in science. And that shouldn't be happen, because both should be really, there is no something like old wisdom and modern set mind of modernity. There is only ignorance, and then we have to reconcile between the spirit and the science, between the knowledge and the moral things, if we can speak. that's what I have. But my husband wants to say something. So I'm sorry.
Let me take the mundane aspects of this. In science, we've been in fear of new knowledge through our history, through the voyage of human on this earth. Anything new, we get afraid from. When the first car started moving on the streets, people were running. This is a monster, because they were accustomed on the horse and the carriage. I mean, the train, the plane, you can name it. But nowadays, we are going to face things which we have never seen. The breakthroughs in nanotechnology, which, I mean, we have labs dealing with nanotechnology in agriculture, but we are calling for now safety committees for nanotechnology, because a nano machine which can make transformation in the cell, if you eat it, then what will happen? I mean, we need to know exactly what's with responsibility. What this nano machine, if you change the nature of an element, even gold, if you change it to nano gold, it's totally different. The behavior of the particles are different from the particles which relate to the gold. And in genetic engineering, the same. Then we have to act with responsibility. But without fear, scientists has to explain the pluses and minuses. And if we don't have the courage to use science and to assess the risk, we're not going to move. And therefore, we can take new science, but with reasonable assessment of the risk. Of course, there was a lot of phobia in NGOs regarding the genetic engineering in plants. Nothing happened. We have never heard about anything happening from the soya bean, which is genetically modified. Nothing. No harm up till now happened. And because you are using genes, which is in Mother Nature, you are only enhancing it. I will just sum up this with a statement saying that there is a shadow and light in every venue of new science and new knowledge. Then you have to assess the shadow and try to understand a little bit about the darkness there, but you have to take the light and move with it for the future. Thank you.
Can I have one more question? I'm sorry. Okay, can you suggest who would be the new spiritual leaders, let's say? Because we're living in a world where it's all about science, technology, entrepreneurship. You know, we are developing so fast. Who will be the new spiritual leaders that will take this this huge and very fast flow that we are in, that can make to reconcile this? Well, yeah.
I think that every one of us is a spiritual leader, because yes, and it is not now the power of the spirituality is not centered, not like old ages. It's everywhere. You know, I mean, when I hear anyone, I'm sure if I hear anyone